There's already 1,000 cards to review, and it's only been like 2 days since we did our last review. Already, I think it's like a page and a half more cards to go through. We got some stuff to talk about. Do the same thing we did last time. First card is Cloud Prince. Mage, 4/4 elemental for 5 mana. Battle cry if you control a secret, deal 6 damage. This card is obviously way, way high in power level just because it is essentially a 1 mana 4/4 if you consider it in the context of Fireball. So in a secret deck, this card's insane, which means if secrets are good, then this will be good. The only issue I feel with secrets right now is that the deck thinning is a little bit weak. You have to actively play the secret instead of just getting it automatically from your deck and then playing it, or then like having the Mad Scientist effect and just like auto playing it like that. The good news is Subject 9 is still in the format, so that might help a little bit, but the card itself probably needs a little bit more draw in it than it would typically in the older versions of Secret Mage, but the card's still really good. And then in kind of the same vein, it's a 2 mana 3/2 for Mage, Arcane Flak Mage. After you play a secret, deal 2 to all enemy minions. So same kind of deal, except in this case, you can't really cheat anything. You have to have the secret in your hand and then play it, so it's a little bit worse, but the effect is obviously very strong. It's like playing Consecration for free, basically, off of the secret. You don't deal the 2 damage to their face, obviously, but that doesn't matter all that much. Very strong. Might even see play in decks that simply run like maybe 3 secrets in it, just because the effect is so strong, and like some kind of tempo secret deck. It's really good. Maybe not. I could see it not seeing play if there weren't so much aggro, or if you didn't need to tech into the aggro matchup. That's, I think, the main determinant as to whether or not this would see play in a Secret Mage deck or not, because Apprentice is still quite good in that regard, that you can discount your secrets by 1 mana to make them more playable. You can play Apprentice plus Secret on turn 4. You can't do this plus Secret on turn 4. You have to wait till turn 5. So there's some flexibility to be had, but still a great card. We have Splitting Axe, Shaman Weapon, 4 mana 3/2 Battle Cry to summon copies of your totems. There is effectively only a few totems that actually matter outside of just the basic ones. There's the Flame Tongue totem, the Manatide totem, the Amalgams, and the new totem from this expansion, the Lackey totem. Those are like the big ones. I feel like there's probably not enough support to make this particularly crazy right now. If there was like another totem with actual good stats or great effect, then maybe this would see play. It might still see play just because duping your Manatide totem can be helpful sometimes, and duping your Lackey totem is pretty attractive. The only problem is a lot of the time when you play totems, they just die instantly. So it's going to be a win more card a lot of the time. Still pretty interesting effect though. We have Royal Kickmaster, Rogue 1/2 for 2 mana. Whenever you play a combo card, add a random combo card to your hand. Note that you do not have to combo the card in order to get this effect. So if you play this into SI7 Agent, you still get the combo card regardless. I think the card is pretty good. The only problem is that its stats are really low. You compare it to like the Murloc card for Shaman. Having 1/1 less in stats makes the card very, very, very less, much less threatening, I guess is where I'm going. So it's more of a value card, I feel, than the all-encompassing Shaman, which is both tempo and value. So harder to use. I don't know if Rogue really needs random combo cards either, since their value generation is already pretty good right now with all like the steel stuff happening. So I'm not entirely convinced, but there are definitely some like really great stuff you can get from this. You can get Evil Miscreant, you can get Van Cleef, you can get Eviscerate as like the top 3 that I can think of. And there's always like the big value ones, like the Contract, which you could get 6 mana from this. So it's not bad, but I think there might be better value options other than this card that are higher tempo, which tempo is kind of what Rogue is all about. Speaking of rogue and tempo, we have a 3-mana 2/2 weapon, which combos the game plus 2 attack. I would essentially think of this more along the lines of Waggle pick mana cost, because you're going to effectively play 4 mana for a 4/2 weapon. In that case, I think Waggle Pick is probably superior in every way, and you would never run this. You might run this as a one-of if you really are looking for weapons, but you have to really need weapons, like you're running like the Dread Corsairs, and you like honestly want to have a weapon at all times. I could see that, but I don't think it's necessary. I think Waggle Pick is good enough on its own a lot of the time for you to be able to pull that off. The only argument I think against this not being enough, against my argument, is that you don't have Raiding Party anymore, so getting the weapon in preparation for the pirates is kind of nice. I just don't think that this really helps push the deck that much. The other upside of this card is you don't bounce something back to your hand, so if you're just trying to hit your opponent in the face, it ain't bad. So we'll see. I got Tortalium Pilgrim, mage, 8 mana, 5/5. Battlecry, discover a copy of spell in your deck and cast it with random targets. So this is like big spell mage kind of card, and the one card that I can definitely see this working with is like Flame Strike or Blizzard or Yogg-Saron's Puzzle Box. Those are like the big ones. The only issue is that late game mage is kind of already very high in power level with Conjurer's Calling. So I feel like this isn't really something that deck is going to want to play, and I feel like that deck is ultimately much higher in power level than whatever this card goes into. So I think this is more of a secondary option for kind of a tier 2 or tier 3 deck. Kind of situational in some ways. But maybe it'll be good in a couple of expansions. It's definitely not a bad effect. Alright, next page. So, we have Mogu the Cultist, which we're going to have to go to the page for this one. It is a 1 mana 1/1, and if your board is full of Mogu Cultists, sacrifice them all and summon Highkeeper Ra, which is a 10 mana 20/20 that at the end of your turn deals 20 damage to all enemies. So, obviously, the effect is insane if it goes off, but getting it to go off is incredibly hard. Taking a look at cloning cards that are in the game, the ones that are the most consistent are probably rogues because of Togwaggle's scheme. They can add a bunch to your deck, and then you can use tack to add them all to your hand. But aside from that, it's much harder for the other classes to pull that off. And I feel like this is going to need more support before it actually becomes good, if it ever becomes good. Definitely something to watch from Wild, though. I feel like this could be pretty funny in Wild if you were to manage to get this to go off and then to duplicate your Highkeeper Ra with like a Faceless or something. That's definitely the combo. To do like Mogu Cultist, get a full board, get Highkeeper Ra, Faceless Highkeeper Ra to destroy your opponent. That seems pretty good. But it'll take a lot of variations for this deck to probably get to its optimal form. We got Anubisath Warbringer, which is Death Rattle, give all minions in your hand +3/+3. Hand buff effects are already inherently slow. The only issue is this card is at 9 mana, so that by the time you play this card, you probably have no minions left in your hand unless you have a lot of card draw. I feel like this is probably best in a case where you can cheat this out, or we can get its mana cost heavily reduced. So like the Rogue Legendary that was released a couple of days ago was pretty good. But outside of that, I think it's probably too clunky to actually see play. The stats aren't bad for a 9 mana card, even with it being like low in health and stuff. The fact that it's all in on attack means that it's easier to destroy, which gets the effect off, which is probably what you're looking for anyway. But I could also see this being used in Rogue in general with like all the Death Rattle trigger stuffs that are in the game right now, especially if it gets to the point where it's discounted in cost. You can buff your hand maybe like 2 or 3 times, and then all those hands in 1/1s get pretty much back to their original size anyway, but they're 1 mana. So very dangerous card in Rogue, but probably not anywhere else at the moment. We will have to see. We have Diseased Vulture, which is a Warlock 4 mana 3/5 beast. After your hero takes damage on your turn, summon a random 3-cost minion, which we can equivalent to be about a 3/3. I would say this card is a little bit too clunky to use. you have to think that in the case of the mage version, which was after you play a spell, you get a 2 mana cost minion. This is after you take damage on your turn, which is significantly harder to do. So I feel like this card probably won't see any play unless the self-damaging effects become much more rewarding than just getting a 3/3, or that they stack faster. Because turn 4 into just getting minions is probably not good enough in a lot of matchups. I think things like warrior, things like mage probably would just eat you up in that kind of mitigation game where they just send a 5 mana rush minion, or they just develop a mountain giant on 4 and you're stuck with this. So I'm thinking probably not at the moment, maybe later, probably not though. I think the power level of the card is too low. It needs much higher upside than what it has right now. We have the Nephariset Ritualist, which is a 2 mana 2/3 battlecry, restore adjacent minions to full health. I guess this is more along the lines of a support for Druid and Paladin than it is anything else, because they're the only other class that has like heal matters as an archetype. I feel like out of those two, probably Druid is more interested in this because of the Loosened Bark deck being around, but Heal Paladin does still exist, so this might end up fueling that to where they can play the 8/8s that they have for 4 mana. We'll have to see. It's a good arena card, though. Rip River Crocolisk. This is definitely a way better effect than just being a beast. Into the fray, give all your taunt minions in your hand +2/+2. This card is okay. It's definitely power creep off of the original give taunt minion in your hand stats. Used to just be you get 1 taunt minion +3/+3. Now you give all taunt minions in your hand +2/+2. So yeah, that's some power creep right there. But as far as whether the card is usable, if the warrior can get a big hand consistently into a taunt deck, maybe. At the moment, I don't see warrior really deviating from the plan that they're at right now, unless they get some really nasty taunt minions, which we're going to see one in a couple of cards from here. There might be hope. There might be hope. I don't think you'd ever run more than one of this card, but even at its current ability, I feel like it might just be too weak, because the overall buff and stats might end up being too minimal with what you're actually trying to get out of the card. You have Pressure Plate. After your opponent casts a spell, destroy a random enemy minion. I would liken this more around the lines of not necessarily deadly shot, but around the realm of Freezing Trap in its play. Usually, when you set up a really good Freezing Trap, your opponent only has 1 minion on board and they can't attack with it for a while. It's the kind of same instance where if your opponent only has 1 minion on board and they really want to keep it, they can't play any spells now either, because they would just deadly shot their own guy. So this is a very powerful secret, and the fact that it's a secret alone makes it like really interesting, because it goes into all the secret random effects that have been introduced this set and from prior sets, as well as having heavy synergy with Zul'jin. So I think this card is very good, and we'll definitely see some experimentation into some Secret Hunter build, or at least see some random effect generation to where people are going to have to play around this now, which is interesting. We have Infested Goblin, which is a 3 mana 2/3 taunt. Death Rattle, add 2 1/1 scarabs with taunt to your hand. This kind of helps the warrior archetype. It gives you a +1 taunt, and then it gives them +2/+2 in stats. I can kind of see it. I feel like this is almost like a budget, how long can this go on kind of card. It is a neutral card, so it makes sense that it's not as good. Could even like this to Infested Tauren, but discounted, but you have to spend 2 mana later. So in that way, it's more of like a more taunt-heavy version of Infested Tauren. That being said, gaining 3 taunts in one card is still pretty good, and being able to slow the game down by that much could be all the control decks need to gain some more playability against aggro matchups if they end up being super overbearing. Especially since we don't have too many useful taunts in the early game right now. So in a replacement one that's neutral is quite nice. Could see play. Wouldn't be surprised. We got Frightened Flunky. This was the taunt minion I was talking about for Warrior. Taunt, battle cry discovered taunt minion. It's Tortorlin, but for 2 mana. Wow. Regardless, because it's literally Stonehill Defender, this card's insane because Stonehill Defender is insane. That's really all there is to it. Stonehill Defender would be played in Warrior if it had the chance to do it again. So here we are. We have Stonehill Defender again. And lastly, we have Wasteland Assassin, 5 mana, 4/2 Stealth Reborn. At the very least, it's a good aggro card, but I feel like there are some better means of getting damage on board and some higher stat totals you can just slam down that aren't so susceptible to being removed. 2 health is... Excuse me. 2 health is like really easy to kill. Like any 2-drop and higher can kill this minion for the most part. So I'm thinking this is more of along the lines of like the finisher kind of slot for aggro decks. And Leroy is like the go-to sort of thing for that. So I don't think this can really replace Leroy. It has to go in tandem with Leroy, and I don't think there's any deck out there, unless it's specifically wanting a reborn minion, that would necessarily want this. So at the moment, maybe like a Paladin thing, but other than that, I don't think so. And that is it for now.